Writing a book and managing that time, it's a great question. So for me, I have one point of reference, writing one book. Now, if you're an author written multiple times, you probably can skip this one altogether. But if it's your first time writing, I tried to tackle writing sort of the same way that I tackled anything else, which is to put chunks of time in my calendar to write. It was a blessing and a curse because I did have time set aside, and I based that, due on kind of my deadline schedule. But when I got to those points, oftentimes big chunks of time looked really daunting, although I needed some larger chunks of time in case I got going. And what had to happen for me, and I write about this in the book actually, is I had to realize that for me, writing a book was a series of starting. Because when I looked at a chapter that was due or a concept, I'd look at a chapter heading and say, okay, I wrote that chapter heading months ago. What does it even mean? I mean, I literally had those moments of like, I don't know what I'm talking about here. And I'd get, filled with anxiety that I wouldn't have something complete to say as I started writing. And of course you don't. You're starting writing. So you just start and you get to where you're going. The second best thing, and I've mentioned this as well, for me in writing the book was setting the deadlines and actually having a publisher who set deadlines. I knew when things were due. And I'll never forget when I first got the writing schedule, it was fairly long. And I thought, well, it won't take that long. And my editor, Kathy Sweeney, was like, oh, slow your roll. It's your first book. Just trust me on this one. Let's give it some time. And it did take time because you're not always in a place to write. You're not always in that mood or that space or have the lack of distractions or whatever it is that you need to write. So I would say, writing the book, committing to micro pieces of it and then breaking those kind of micro pieces or sections down into just starting. I mean, really all I did was I started each little section of the book knowing it was due at some point a little ways out. And sometimes I had to start, and I had to start, and I had to start again. But what I find is when I'd start, all of a sudden something would appear. If I sat there and looked at, I have to get from here to here, I'm never going to get there. So I think that those two things, having a due date schedule in which you set your start times back, and then remembering you just start, and you start writing and see where it takes you, and then you can adjust everything else from there. And sometimes you're moving up and getting ahead of your schedule. Maybe occasionally you're a little bit behind, try not to let that happen, but manage to that overall goal within those little points of starting.